Welcome back to another episode of The Founder, a show that features entrepreneurs and their early stories of ingenuity, struggle, and perseverance to get their companies off the ground. We do our best to capture the uncensored, uncovered look behind the curtain into what founders really face when getting started. I'm your host, Kallaway. Our founder guest on today's episode is a dual threat, getting his start at art school studying both graphic design and full-stack computer engineering. After spending some time on Google's Chrome team and being exposed to what's possible on the internet across audio, video, and cloud, he spent the next few years sharpening his skills, working for the government and teaching at Cal Berkeley. Ultimately, he found his way back to his creative roots and started a podcast as a side project. But when he tried to record remotely with his brother and best friend, found that the virtual collaboration tools available just weren't good enough to achieve the quality they expected. And that's how Squadcast was born. Today at Squadcast, this founder and his team have built the Lamborghini of virtual audio recording. Their mission is to amplify collaboration through technology, and they do it by enabling podcasters to capture the highest quality audio from their conversations with guests all over the world. When you use Squadcast, you immediately realize the massive difference between their platform and something like Zoom, Skype, or almost every other video audio calling platform that we use today. While Zoom and Skype compress the audio before playing it back to your headphones, giving it that crush type of phone call sound, Squadcast records the audio on both sides locally, saving it as the highest quality possible, and then sending it through as a version to your headphones so you can hear the other person talking. Squadcast is building the future of audio collaboration, and with partnerships with Dolby, as well as new features coming out around lossless video recording and the ability to watch your favorite podcasters record their conversations live, there's a lot to be excited about. This is an inspiring interview that highlights a company at the cutting edge of audio and shines a light into the future of virtual collaboration. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Now introducing the co-founder of Squadcast, Zach Moreno. Let's get it. Zach, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, super excited to walk through Squadcast today. So for those listening, I actually use Squadcast to record all of my podcast interviews. It's an amazing product, lossless audio, and Zach will get into why it's so great. So Zach, before we walk through your journey and your story as a founder, I like to start with an anchor point. So can you provide just a snapshot of what's the mission vision of the company? What are the products that you sell? How big are you by any KPI that you use to measure growth?
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to help with your show and kind words. It's very meaningful. And our mission is to remove barriers to empowering collaboration. So to amplify collaboration through technology. And we do that by providing a platform for professional podcasters to connect with their guest anywhere in the world and record quality audio for their audience experience. And we have been at it about 4 years, and we have gotten here by just getting out of the way and listening to the podcast community, always validating against their wonderful feedback. And that's really what's empowered us to be of service and build technology in service of that mission of amplifying collaboration. From here, we have a lot of exciting areas that we're moving in. I think chief among them is providing audio and video recording. So we do audio today, and very soon here, we'll be adding video recording to the platform with that same emphasis on quality.
Yeah, we're very excited for the video piece. And we'll get into growth and product in a second, but when it comes to the inflection points that you've seen of adoption over the past 4 years, obviously this COVID environment, everyone being virtual and more podcasts being started than ever before has probably been huge. What were the other inflection points that you saw in the business growth over the past 4 years, and what would you attribute that to?
Yeah, so we are a self-funded bootstrap startup. So we've been growing steadily over the course of the last 4 years. And I would say you're right. Good guess. The biggest inflection point that we've experienced to date was the shelter-in-place order, forcing podcasters that may have had the opportunity to record in a physical studio together and maybe did some degree of remote interviews. Now everything all of a sudden was forced to be remote content production. And that's something that's a bit surreal, if I can be transparent about it, because we have a lot of friends whose businesses were impacted in the exact opposite way by the shelter in place and physical businesses or physical products. And I have a lot of respect for that journey as well. So to have any degree of success is something that we're honored to be of service. And it's a bit weird that we were working on remote content production 4 years before it was like a requirement for everybody's production. We're not fortune tellers or anything like that, but it's really great that we're in a position to help people stay, uphold their quality, uphold their audience experience, and continue to stay on schedule with their podcast production.
Yeah, totally. I'm sure there's thousands out there, if not more, that made the switch during this time and are loving the lossless audio. So pumped to get into that. I think that provides a great anchor point. And so what I like to do is kind of rewind the clock. So kind of as fast or as slow as you'd like, walk us through your life and background leading up to starting and then working on Squadcast.
Yeah, so I went to art school and studied graphic design as well as front end engineering and full stack engineering. So that's kind of my background prior to Squadcast. I worked and did my internship on the Google Chrome team while I was still in school, which opened my eyes to kind of more of the emerging web standards and kind of bleeding edge of what's possible on the web and with like cloud and browser capabilities. And audio and video are a big part of that, as well as kind of real time collaboration. So that proved very helpful. A few years later, when I had a day job working in the government and was teaching full stack web development at Cal Berkeley, had an opportunity to write a book on that topic, and was just kind of sharpening my skills. Not really sure, where I would go in the private industry after kind of a tour of duty in the government. And it wasn't really until I took a step back and stopped trying to dream up ideas for a startup and kind of went back to my roots of wanting to do a creative side project. I used to paint every day and was really in the visual arts, and took a step back and decided to do a creative side project within podcasting. I had always been an avid listener because I love learning from podcasts. It's a very quick way to go deep on any topic. And I had read an article about this new category within podcasts, like sci-fi audio dramas. And I'm a huge space and sci-fi nerd, and I have a hypothesis that the world is in desperate need of positive science fiction. Too much of the science fiction that's out in popular culture is dystopian and negative. And if that's kind of the well of ideas that people pull future technology from and turn science fiction into science fact, we're not really giving a lot of positive ideas for the next generation and the generation thereafter.
That's true. It's very doomsday.
Yeah, too much dystopian. So I wanted to contribute some ideas to the best of my ability in the positive science fiction realm, and wanted to do that in a new way through audio storytelling in a podcast. And my brother is an audio engineer and sound designer, and my best friend is a decorated playwright and very creative sci-fi fan like myself. So on the surface, it seemed like we had a lot of the raw skills to be able to do that and do that very well. But we ran into this bottleneck because we are a remote distributed team. We quickly realized that the state of the art for collaborating and recording and producing that actual vocal content was very limited by the state of the art in technology. And we just kept assuming that this had to be a solved problem because podcasting had been around for years. And we just kept looking and searching and talking and listening to people. And turns out we eventually networked our way to kind of OG podcasters, and they're like, yeah, this is the state of the art, and it's kind of paper thin, like this is what we do, but nobody's really happy with it. And yeah, that would be great if there was a way to do it and still maintain that very high quality lossless audio. So that's really when we pivoted from the sci-fi audio drama to what has become Squadcast, is a web-based platform for capturing studio quality audio and connecting anywhere in the world.
Yeah. I'd love for you to compare kind of your startup journey with that of some of your friends in the fact that I think it's rare that you're technical and able to experiment, spin up small tests, actually build your MVP product and test it without having to raise a ton of money and or hire a freelancer, et cetera. It gives you so much more flexibility. Can you talk to some of the experiences and the advantages you had early on when you were building the product and compare that to potentially some of the struggles that you've heard from some of your friends?
Yeah, and I think it's a somewhat common pitfall where non-technical founders have an idea for a solution, a technology-based solution to the problem that they've identified, and then they're really in this tight spot of how do I actually bring this to life? And it's tempting to work with contractors or third parties or different ways to kind of uh, get that development actually started, and um, that adds a lot of risk to the transitions from contractor A to contractor B to you know trying it to pick it up myself, and you run into kind of the switching costs between different approaches to development, and over time that can really be a fairly large risk surface area. So I mean, one of our advisors, our founding advisor, Harry Duran, tells a story of when he first started a technology company, an app for DJs, and he ran into that problem. His contractor, kind of technical contractor, just kind of fell off the project for life reasons, and it just the transition to the next person just was kind of not feasible and not documented, and some of these other things. So to have full stack software engineering as kind of an intrinsic skill by at least one of the founders or somebody who is like an equity stakeholder in the company, I think can help avoid that pitfall. I mean, there's always the bus problem. If somebody gets hit by a bus, like knock on wood, that's always there. But a professional developer will know how to document and engineer in a way that is using standard approaches to building things at scale that another professional developer can spot those patterns and pick up kind of where people left off. I mean, that's always some added complexity, but that's the way I see it. Is that I'm very grateful that I started with that background because it allowed us to be very aligned and confident that I'm going to be around to see this thing through, no matter what, and even worst case scenario, do the work up front to make sure that we can transition and not just transition to the next Zach or next engineer, but also setting up a solid foundation for engineer number two and engineer number three, product manager to come in and have a cohesive approach to things that will allow the engineering team to scale. So that's really what we've been doing recently. Is we've brought on a product manager. We're going to be hiring some more engineers, and a lot of that prerequisite work is important there.
Yeah, which is so critical, especially when you're spinning people up. I totally agree. Let's dive into the quote unquote science a little bit. I think a lot of people at home know Zoom, and if you think about a way that a super low fidelity person could record a podcast, they could hop on Zoom. The audio is obviously crushed, and I know that because I have a little bit of background in audio. But for people who don't, can you walk through what's the difference between recording with Zoom and recording with Squadcast? Like, what makes Squadcast better, and why hasn't a company like Zoom incorporated this kind of lossless audio?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's actually kind of an invisible feature. So it is something that I'm grateful you're calling attention to. Is the experience on the surface that you're having when you connect with your guest and actually record is fairly similar to other video conferencing applications, and we chose that. That was intentional because of the UX patterns that people all over the world are have become familiar with over time. So it does feel kind of comfy and familiar. But the difference, the exception, is that the content that you're recording is studio quality, and that's a pretty big distinction that makes all the difference when it comes to being a professional podcaster and optimizing and really crafting a great experience for your audience. And to answer your question, how we actually do that or what leads to that difference is a lot of times people think that the microphone, a professional microphone, is the difference between audio quality. And it does make a difference. Like you're using a Shure SM7B, I'm using an Audio Technica ATR 2100. Those microphones will sound different from one another versus like, a kind of Apple lavalier microphone on their headphones or AirPods. Those will all sound different if you listen to them kind of back to back to back. Um, but it's not really what's lowering the quality because of recording on something like Zoom or Skype. What lowers the quality there is that the audio is first being sent over the internet and then it's being recorded. So it goes in transit and then it's recorded. And because it's being sent over the internet, that's really where the compression and the quality is being reduced because they're trying to make it high enough but still keep you connected no matter what. What we prioritize is the quality of the audio. So we capture it at the source and then we push it up to the cloud. So it's really kind of a figure ground reversal there where we optimize the quality and then we're pushing it up to the cloud. And we do that in the background while you're recording. And that's actually our progressive upload or kind of cloud autosave technology, which is, I'm proud to say, patent pending. That's why other people haven't done it, is because it's a new approach. It's a completely new approach to how we record and upload audio. And that's really what gives us this sweet spot between quality and reliability.
Gotcha. Yeah, and for people listening, when they hear this, it'll sound super crispy because both of us have, neither of us are using the Apple lavalier mic, but because of Squadcast, that's what makes it sound so good. And the progressive upload piece, which people might not be aware of, Squadcast is essentially saving our audio locally on each side and progressively uploading it so that if we get disconnected, like we just did, it's saved versus other platforms. Sometimes if you're not saving it actively or if the platform's not designed correctly, you could lose all the audio if you get disconnected, which is a nightmare in a podcast situation.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like, how do we have our cake and eat it too? And then that is our primary recording engine. We also have a completely independent backup recording engine, which captures the entire duration of the conversation. So from the first person joining to the last person leaving, we're capturing the audio in the cloud. So kind of how Zoom does it, that's how our backups work. So we do both really. And that's where it's kind of like in any situation, you're going to have your content for your audience like later that day or, later this week without having to go through the awkwardness of, hey, do we re-record or my file didn't show up or any of that kind of waiting around. All that goes away with Squadcast, where you just connect, have a great conversation, and even in the worst case scenario, you're still going to have your episode out.
So talk about, future product vision. So you mentioned the video, which will be huge. And I was on one of your product releases where you talked about this partnership you have with Dolby, which is awesome. Talk about some of those things. And if you were to, look forward 3 years from now, what kind of wrinkles do you want the product to have by then?
Yeah, so video recording is a giant step forward for us. And we've always had video for the real time, video conferencing kind of conversation, is what I think of it as. And that's because it adds flow to the conversation. You get body language and eye contact and all the benefits of flowing dialogue that come from that. It's kind of not obvious until you take it away. And then it's like, wow, I wish I could see the person. So that's where it's our most requested feature because our customers see that we have video. So it's like, oh, if I could just record that, my audience would love it. And we listen, as I said before. So we've always been mindful of that. And we've been doing a lot of the prerequisite engineering work to advance towards that. So I mentioned, and you mentioned progressive upload. All of the engineering that went into that was taking into account that we would also need to send video with that same approach, and same with the backups, right? So we need to have all of those same lessons learned and reliability that we've engineered for our solution when it comes to video. And that's really what we've done is we're taking that same approach of quality and reliability, and that is right around the corner. So incredibly exciting to be empowering podcasters to have more opportunity when it comes to creating quality content for their audience and reaching your audience in more places, whether they're listening through headphones or they're able to also watch it on their phone or wherever. So that's kind of the near term. The midterm beyond that, you're absolutely right. We have a partnership, a unique partnership with Dolby Labs to add some of their heritage and insights when it comes to enhancing audio. So optional, kind of non-destructive post-production to do things like remove background noises, kind of normalize the loudness between different speakers, and really make that turnkey. So you can just say, hey, I have this recording with person A, person B, and I just want to run that through Dolby's magic, and I'll get a better version back of that to set me up for even easier time when it comes to producing my episode. So that's really exciting, as well as another layer of kind of, I mentioned video and how that adds flow to the dialogue. Kind of another level of that is spatialized audio for the conversation. And that's some pretty cool stuff where if you have two people, you don't really notice it. But when you have three people, it makes sense to kind of, in real life, we hear people like in the other room, and you can kind of hear a difference, whether they're right in front of you or far away or to your right or to your left. And we don't often think about that, but it adds another level of reality to, closer to reality is what we're after, making this as high fidelity as possible and close to real life. So that collaboration is, incredibly exciting, as well as adding more abilities to engage with your audience as a professional podcaster. It can be kind of lonely, and unless you put things in place to engage with your audience on an ongoing basis, that's not something that's built into podcasting like it is YouTube, for example. At least not yet. So we have a lot of really great ideas. Again, direct feedback from our customers that want to have both the ability to take the conversation to their audience live. That's kind of the obvious one. The less obvious one is the ability to have a private audience that you can invite to Squadcast and have kind of early access and raw access to your conversation. And maybe that's premium Patreon subscribers or something along those lines, or maybe it's just other members of your production team who want to passively engage with the interview, but without needing to be recorded and without needing to be recording audio and video. So our bigger customers that we work with, bigger teams, I should say, like for example, Vox Media has the Recode Decode podcast, and Kara Swisher is interviewing her guest, and her executive producer Erica Anderson wants to be kind of a passive, more in the background, so she can maybe put like talking points or questions or follow-up questions, other ideas. And that opens up a number of possibilities for ways to take the creative experience.
The silent like crowd behind the glass idea is pretty awesome. Especially, there's so many ways you could go with that, right? You could have people weigh in and launch a question live, or have them vote on a poll, and then that one funnels up and comes right on your screen when you're interviewing someone. There's a lot you can do. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of ideas when it comes to other forms of integrations as well. We focus on being the best in the world and the best in our industry at recording quality content. And like us, there are other people who are focused on their part of the podcasting workflow, and we plan to integrate with them. So folks like Andrew Mason over at Descript is doing amazing things with the post-production. So taking the audio you captured with a guest on the other side of the planet and taking that audio and making it a really modern, advanced approach to producing and doing the actual editing of that podcast is something that Descript does really well. And we are planning on a kind of a two-way integration there that should be pretty exciting to our customers and the community.
That's awesome. Other things too that I think would be cool, and I'm sure you've thought of it, but I use a platform called Headliner to make little audio or audiogram video snippets that I post on social, and being able to dump the high quality video that you record through Squadcast directly into a template with Headliner, whichever side of the platform it's on, would be amazing, right? Then you don't have to cut and chop and do everything. So things like that are super, super exciting.
Yeah, that's another one. We use that for our podcast, Between Two Mics, and a lot of people do. It's incredibly useful tool and platform for doing exactly that, creating essentially commercials for your podcast episode. Being able to take the audio and video soon here to other platforms like Headliner. I think Descript has an element of that as well, and there's they do it differently, so I don't even think they're competing with each other. But all of those opportunities are very exciting for us, and yeah, that's another one that is coming as well.
Yeah, when you think about the podcasting landscape, so I started this podcast in February 2020, and I still think we've just scratched the surface of what's possible. I think what's interesting to me, and I love podcasts and have been a huge consumer of them before I started this one. It's one of the only creative mediums where you can do multiple things at the same time, and that's what I've heard from a lot of people that love it. You can learn deep on a topic or just be entertained and also work out and also cook, right? A lot of these other mediums, video focused, social media forward, you can't do anything other than consume it. And that's why I love podcasting. What's your take on the industry as a whole? And like, where do you think the podcasting industry is going?
Yeah, that's exactly what we focus our. I agree with you fundamentally, and I think it's early days and it's going in a lot of very interesting directions. So the concept of a podcast is actively being defined, and on our podcast Between Two Mics, that's where we explore and have conversations with people like Andrew Mason or like the founders of Headliner that are doing interesting things and kind of pushing up against the edges of what is a podcast and what can be done with it. And to bring this full circle, that's where we started, right? Was I learned about this new thing in podcasting that didn't used to exist, a science fiction audio drama, and that's its own form of innovation. It's on the content storytelling side. It's not really the technology itself, but in all different aspects of podcasting in the community and the industry, there are people who are innovating. So I'm proud that with Squadcast, we play a part in that. And it's really, looking for those stories and telling them. And so to answer your question, I think it's going in a number of different exciting directions. Like on the analytics side, we have some standards that have emerged and standards bodies that are community driven. Kind of less sexy, but really what it empowers is a clearer path to monetization with standard analytics and metrics on what actually is a listen, what gets counted as a listen, is clearer data for creatives to be able to have trust when it comes to their relationship to have sponsorship or ads, which has been a bit murky in the podcasting ecosystem. So seeing that kind of solidify behind the scenes, I think it's a prerequisite to more people being professional when it comes to their podcasters and being able to take that and make it a full-time job, and something that people, it's not just a hobby, but taking that kind of professional. So that's a big one that we see momentum towards. I mentioned, we sit kind of in the middle of the podcasting workflow with remote content production. So the content within a podcast is, fundamentally audio, but we're seeing more overlap when it comes to video. So that's something that is a bit unexpected, and I think that's really being driven by the audience behavior and their expectations. Edison Research does an annual report that they call the Infinite Dial report, where they do a bunch of surveys with a bunch of listeners all over different demographics, and there's all kinds of interesting data in there. But really, when it comes to this question of audio and video and how the audience sees it, because as creators, we see it as a podcast and a YouTube channel and a Instagram and like all these different things. But from kind of the outside looking in at the work that we're doing as creatives, they really see it as a concept, as a show. It's not really, oh, that's a podcast and that's a YouTube channel. That's the Joe Rogan experience, and I can consume it on clips on Instagram or Instagram stories or on the full video with kind of clips from young Jamie on the screen, and like for 3 hours long. Or if I'm in my car on my commute, I can listen to it. And or I want to be productive and do my gardening or walk my dog or do any of the things that people do while they have their headphones in. That's really, I think, the magic that podcasting has been able to really zero in on and give people opportunities to learn and grow, or just be entertained. Like if you want to escape and do things like that, like sci-fi audio dramas is a great way. It's not all about learning all the time. um, but you just kind of want to have a more of a passive consumption experience while you're still being active, like physically at the gym or something like that. That's really where I think podcasting is bridging the gap when it comes to content for audience members. So that's what we've done. We've embraced the concept of a show and are building tools and a platform for creatives to really express themselves and have more potential to create and craft experiences for their audience, both with audio and video.
I feel like podcasts have been around for a fairly long time, but only in the last, I don't know, 4 to 6 years have they really, really ballooned in popularity. And I'm curious what you think that's because of. Is it with the emergence of social, especially video first social, the sharing of different shows has become easier and therefore more discoverable? Or was there some like societal shift where, it's a classic compounding, like snowball rolling downhill? Like, what do you think it was that made it go from just a super niche medium that really obsessed people enjoyed to now it's fairly full scale?
I think the latter is what I would lean towards. It's probably some combo of both. But I would say, if it's a ratio between those two, it's probably 80-20 towards the latter. So that is, I believe there's something missing that podcast is kind of filling the void for. And that's really long form dialogue where we go deep on a topic. That was kind of missing, and especially kind of the world kind of went the other way with Twitter, and everybody's talking about shorter attention spans and creating content that are like really bite sized because nobody can pay attention for longer than a couple seconds. Podcasting is kind of the rebound of that, where you know um, people want to hear, and I don't mean this example to get political or anything, but it's just what came to mind. People want to. Uh, they're tired of hearing sound bites from politicians. So the rebound of that is, let's hear what Andrew Yang or Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump, for that matter, whatever your political slant, I want to hear deep thoughts and dialogue on a topic that go deeper than the sound bites that get pushed to us in commercials or something like that. I want to really go deep and understand many ways to think about a topic. And that's really where I think podcasting is appealing to people, where it's, wow, this is actually a deeper discussion in one direction or another.
There's different types of learners. Obviously, there's something about the auditory factor of it that makes it so much more consumable. Even if you're a visual learner and you like to read, reading a book from someone, especially with all the fluff they have to put in to hit the certain requirements, versus a raw, long form, often fairly unedited podcast that still cuts to the point, but it gives you some depth. I think there's something there that it really strikes a nice balance.
A lot has been said about the intimate nature of podcasting, because you're kind of people talking directly into your ear, and also to do that, you're also kind of cutting out the sounds of the world. So you're giving over complete control of one sensory experience to somebody else. Like, that's a very trusting thing to do. And I think that builds a deep relationship with the host of the show and the guests that come on and join them, or the storytellers that you're a fan of. I think that also makes podcasting fairly sticky from an audience perspective, where like my wife feels like she is best friends with the hosts of You're Wrong About, even though they've never met. She knows these people fairly well, because week after week or topic after topic, you get to know these people, and hearing their voice, like, it's different than a book, right? Like you drew that parallel, where it's got some similarities where you have to be an active participant to imagine, like you do when you're reading words on a page, but you're not so active in that you also have to use your eyes. So it's kind of somewhere in between. And that's where I feel like podcasting has kind of found this sweet spot in between books and videos. And like you started off by saying, like being able to maintain whatever it is you're doing physically, while still learning and growing, or being entertained.
Totally. I want to shift to some of these other questions around kind of your personal experience with the company. So I know you mentioned you bootstrapped it, so I'm assuming you haven't raised outside money, but a lot of people come on here and we have companies that have gone through several rounds of institutional capital and they provide lessons learned from investor pitches. Can you take the other side of it? So, have you gone through any investor pitches? If so, what have you learned? But if not, what's been your mentality around continuing to bootstrap and not take institutional capital?
Yeah, well, I'll preface it by saying that we're not zealots. We're not like trying to prove something by self-funding. If anything, we saw it as an experiment and just to see how long we could go for, without raising outside capital. And also, we felt like that was a sign of good faith to potential future venture capital, that we would have shown and demonstrated our passion to not just build this thing but also to fund it and to actively try to de-risk it, so that way when we are pitching investors in the future, we could already demonstrate traction, we could start to demonstrate product market fit, and that my co-founder Rock and I are personally invested in solving this problem, and therefore the alignment with the venture capital would be even more defined. And I think that's what I always recommend to founders, is to try to see how far you can go. The hard part is the day job, right? So I'm not gonna leave that out, because I myself and my co-founder Rock had day jobs while we worked on Squadcast for a year and a half before we made the jump and went full time. So I do believe that there are certain types of startups that require venture capital. There's no question about it. Like, if you are developing a new pharmaceutical treatment, you absolutely have a very long amount of time before you will get that product to market, because of clinical trials and FDA approval, depending on what country you're in, patenting, like all of those things just require time and require 100% focus, where you're not going to have a day job while you're doing that. So no question that. But what it gives you, if you're not in a startup that is 100% that demanding for years before you can get something out to customers, which I think is actually a fairly big slice of the pie. Like, I think that criteria would be most technology companies. If you're doing SaaS, right, we have very quick turnaround times to shipping product and getting things out to people. So I think there's that's a pretty big chunk of the startup ecosystem. And what it does is it gives you that optionality to say, I want to keep this independent, because you can always go out and raise venture capital, but you can't give them their money back, right? So what you give yourself is the option to go out and raise if that is the best thing for your company and you want to continue using that capital to scale. You also asked me the question of pitching and our experience with venture capital. Absolutely. We have pitched a number of different firms, and more recently, they have pitched us, which is a bit surreal to have it flip, where funds are reaching out to us saying they want a remote solution within their portfolio. They want a position within podcasting because they read A16Z's white paper on podcasting, and they need a position in that industry. So respect and gratitude to all of those firms, because those are fairly compelling pitches of, hey, we think you should raise a Series A, we think you should raise a seed round, or whatever it is, and here's how we think we can help you scale and really deliver more. that's a bit surreal. That's a lot of founders' dream. And we had a very solid foundation with my co-founder. Rock has a background in finance and accounting and business. And like I said, we just did the experiment and wanted to maintain that optionality and demonstrate product market fit. And we just kind of kept on that journey. We resisted the temptation. It's always there. Like the temptation to raise is always there because things get hard. Money often looks like the solution. But what we found is that money's not always the answer. And there's a certain degree of oversight that you gain when it comes to venture capital. And also, you're also making a commitment to annually thereafter going out and raising more. And that's something that I think often gets left out, where people think, if I make it to next year, then I'll figure it out at that point. I'll figure it out at that point. You just kind of keep moving the goalpost. And we really dug our heels in and decided to figure out our business model up front and at least have a solid hypothesis and ways to test it. So that's really what we did, and we just were very fortunate that we weren't 100% right, but we were more right than we were wrong, and then we were able to self-correct along the way.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like you found that product market fit pretty quick, relatively, and that's huge, right? That can, especially in a SaaS business, once you find that and start getting your core contingent of customers, that can help pay you guys, feed the initial growth, and then yeah, that optionality is critical.
Another piece to that is also just conducting yourself as a professional. So not just a professional and aspiring expert within whatever topic your product and you're founding a company within, but also being a professional founder. There are just skills that are intrinsic to that. Whatever industry or topic or whatever you're working to solve, there are skills like pricing and business model and being able to do testing and just looking at analytics and um, doing kind of a cohort analysis. And these things are not sexy or fun really all the time. But, one example is pricing, where Rock and I both are very much students of, in our case, our business model is within software as a service, a SaaS. So we really took it upon ourselves to become professional SaaS founders. And what does SaaS pricing look like? Why does it work that way? What are kind of the different levers within your business to really make sure that you continue to grow a healthy business? So that's another thing that I always nudge founders towards, like take your product and your market seriously, but also yourself and really taking it upon yourself to grow as a professional founder.
Yeah, totally. I want to shift into this section that we just launched recently around wellness. So I think for me, the way I think about wellness is kind of in a stack. So I think about, mindfulness, nutrition, fitness, sleep, all that kind of compounds together. When you have a lot of those aligned, if not all, it starts to produce, benefits around cognitive, physical, everything performance wise. So what I want to do is I'm going to walk through a couple of main categories and you kind of share, how you think about it. If you have any processes or routines during the day, if you use any products or brands that you can't live without, just give your thoughts on each one. All right, so the first one is morning routine. So do you have a set way you start the day, and what does that look like?
Yeah. I get up fairly early, not always at the same time because I need to be consistent on the time I go to sleep to really get that, and that's always not 100%. More so because I do want to have some degree of life with my, time with my wife and friends or whatever, than working late. And then I practice meditation. I practice mindfulness, breathing practices. And that's something that I've been doing since I had been diagnosed with depression in high school. And I tell this story because I looked at mindfulness meditation as a solution to that problem. And I figured, okay, I can solve that problem, But what I didn't realize is that I thought it would get me back to neutral and then I'd just be all right. I'd be a normal person. What I didn't realize is that it would carry me well past all right and continue finding ways to unlock creativity and ideas and potential, that I could find ways to express my creativity. So I swear by mindfulness and, encourage it to my team and still practice it daily.
Yeah. What do you do for mindfulness today? Like 15, 20 minutes, or is it longer?
Yeah, 15, 20 minutes. I have a mindfulness kind of breathing practice that I do. Sometimes the Mind Valley app, they're also customers and, podcasters. They have, I think, two podcasts now. And they have this 6 phase guided meditation from the founder, Vishen. And sometimes I throw that in there to kind of spice things up. And it's a bit different where it has some visualization and kind of unifying thought experiments and stuff. So um, I've had some success with both of those things. I love coffee and, take my time making the coffee. I don't try to like automate that. It's something that I intentionally like being kind of analog. And I don't really introduce, it's more what I don't do in the morning, I think is really important, where I don't just jump right into like email and social media. And I tend to focus on our team and the work that's happening that day to make sure everybody's able to move forward. And I kind of try to set them up for success. And then I set myself up for success. And then I kind of drink some coffee and jump into that.
Totally. What about nutrition, eating, fasting? Do you fast on a consistent basis or at all? And kind of from a food perspective, do you have consistent things you go to, or is it all over the place?
Yeah, I do intermittent fasting. Not every day, but most days I would say. I've gotten used to it and it's more of a habit now. And that's great. Occasionally I'll do longer term fasts. I think the longest I've done was like 3 days, and that was pretty interesting and had some good results. Um, and I practice jujitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and love that. My co-founder got me interested in that, and it's incredibly physically demanding, but also mentally stimulating. And it's like a lot like playing chess, and has a lot of it's very thoughtful. And also I practice yoga, so those fit very well with mindfulness. And breathing is a huge part of both Brazilian jiu-jitsu because people are trying to stop you from breathing. So your breathing is really important. And of course, yoga and stretching. I've always been very flexible, and that's kind of what led me towards Brazilian jiu-jitsu and a yoga practice. That my yoga practice is now to a point where I can't stop doing it because my body gets really tight, and I'm mindful of that. So I can't really let myself stop because then I get all kind of like I'm aware of that and it bugs me. So I'm constantly stretching. Intermittent fasting for sure. And then my wife is fully plant based and vegan for many years. And I would say my diet is like 80% plant based because of that. And I enjoy cooking plant based, and it's pretty fun.
Awesome. We kind of covered the fitness and sleep piece of it, but what about content diet? So any, newsletters, micro content around daily or weekly podcasts, and then any books that you would recommend more longer term?
Yes, I am very, very intentional about my media diet and my consumption of information, because that's part of what led to the depression that I mentioned before, as well as a lack of sleep. Back then, I was sleeping maybe 2, 3 hours a night, and as soon as I was able to regulate my sleep and be mindful of my consumption, my media consumption, that cleared itself up pretty quickly. As well as listening to reggae music. That's the wild card that I don't
Yeah, that is a
always
wild card.
mention, but it's very positive and uplifting, and um, it's just I enjoy it. So that is a big part of the I do listen to music, although people who know me know that I'm incredibly repetitive with the music that I listen to. So I don't often like introduce, I'm not always like looking for the new thing. I listen to a lot of the same music, and that bugs like my wife in the car and stuff because it can get old. But I feel like my library is big enough where I can kind of move between underground rap or like jazz hip hop beats like Jay Dilla and some of the playlists that are around that genre on Spotify I really enjoy. And then podcasts, I do listen to a lot of podcasts, of course, our own. But then I really enjoy the Startups for the Rest of Us podcast from one of our mentors, Rob Walling, as well as the Zen Founder podcast, actually from his wife, Dr. Sherry Walling. Those are two of my favorite shows, and they're kind of amazes me that they're a couple. So that Zen Founder podcast, that's one that I gravitate to a lot, as well as the sci-fi audio dramas I mentioned before. So that really, for me, it started with like Ars Paradoxica and the Bright Sessions, and there've been some really great ones since then. Like Girl in Space is one of my favorites from my friend Sarah. It has a huge fan base, and it's just really inspiring. Like they're really, up against the edge, pushing what storytelling can be done in this medium. So I really enjoyed those. And then books. Yeah, I read a lot of nonfiction, like startup kind of stuff, as well as autobiographies. So the most recent one I read, or I should just say biographies. I read. I mentioned I'm a huge space nerd, so I read Dr. Werner von Braun's book called Dr. Space, which I really enjoyed. And yeah, the Elon Musk biography, like I like a lot of biographies from people who have really done big things and just kind of how they think about it.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely link all those up. Cool. So these are the final two questions that we ask on the show. We ask these to every guest, so I'm pumped to hear your take on this. The first one is the Startup Manifesto. So if you had to write a startup manifesto with 5 of the most important key lessons or pitfalls to avoid when starting out, what would they be?
Yeah, I would say listen. Like you're not going to get product market fit if you're not listening to what people are telling you. Of course, be passionate, but also be mindful of the passion for the problem that you're solving. Like your customer's passion probably matters more than yours. Like if they're not passionate about it, no amount of passion from you is going to get you there. 3, I would say is focus. Like it's probably more important what you don't do. And it's also, of course, important what you choose to do, but focus works in both directions. And Jason Fried, the founder of Basecamp and Hey, their team, they have this term JOMO, the joy of missing out. So I think that can help add focus. Reputation is another one where I think that there is it's not just about like keeping people happy. It's about how you show up and address when people aren't happy, I would say is probably more impactful. And those people who are screaming at you in worst case scenario or upset or anything like that, they are extremely passionate and want your product to succeed. And that's why they're so upset about it. So they are your future super fans. And all you have to do is listen, hear them out, take ownership, and address the concern head on and show that to them. And they will be with you forever. And are really, your biggest drivers of your reputation. And also your product gets better because they're going to tell you what's wrong, and how to make it right. So reputation is huge. And, also preparation for inflection points before they come. Like, I think a lot of people plan for the worst case scenario, but maybe to some degree fail to plan for the best case scenario. And for us, it was shelter in place, and I'm really grateful that we were prepared in advance of that, because it would have brought us to our knees if we weren't ready to scale. We weren't ready to provide that service at that scale. So the only way is by being prepared in advance of that. And I think that's 5. So if it's not, sleep is really important. Don't stop sleeping.
We'll keep the bonus in there too. That's a great list. Thank you for that. And then the last question is a nomination. So this has been fantastic way for the show to grow. And we've gotten some incredible founders that have come through given the nomination. So it's your turn to nominate another founder that's either a friend, colleague, or mentor of yours that you would like to see on the show in the future.
I will nominate my mentor and now friend, who I just mentioned, Rob Walling. He is the host of the Startups for the Rest of Us podcast. He co-founded a company called Drip that sold to Lead Pages, and is now the founder of Tiny Seed, an accelerator for bootstrap SaaS founders focused on B2B. And then also MicroConf, a community and in-person and now virtual event for bootstrap founders working on B2B. So I'll nominate my friend Rob.
Awesome. Yeah, excited to talk to him. Before we wrap, I just want to acknowledge you quickly. I mean, in listening to the conversation, one thing I took away is just how thoughtful and sharp you are with topics within your industry, but also topics without. You have a really crisp grasp on a lot of the core startup fundamentals that we walk through. And I think, for people listening who are aspiring entrepreneurs or just interested in these things, that's the way you need to be, right? That's the way you want to be, to have that crisp grasp on those fundamentals to be able to then springboard into opportunities. And like you said, be prepared for those inflection points. So I just want to say, thanks again for coming on. I'm personally super inspired by that, and we'll continue to be a huge fan of Squadcast as you guys keep growing.
Well, thank you for saying that. I really appreciate your kind words, and you honor me by having me on the show. So thank you so much for that.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Last thing, just to plug the website, social media, any contact for you or the business?
Totally. So I'm on social, Zach with an H __ Moreno. And Squadcast is at Squadcast FM everywhere. And the website is squadcast.fm. If you're on the fence about starting a podcast or you love listening to them, creating them is more fun and pretty easy. And with Squadcast, we make that we turn that up to 11. So that's something we'd love the opportunity to help with. And the podcast community, I can't say enough good things about it. Incredibly welcome and open. So if you feel like an outsider or it's this vague thing, it's not. It's pretty easy, and the community will welcome you with open arms like they did me. I came in as an outsider, and now I have the privilege of joining you in this interview today. So we're happy to help with that. Or if not, listening is also a great way to learn and stay engaged. So thank you either way.
Amazing. Zach Moreno, founder of Squadcast. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to that episode with Zach Moreno of Squadcast. If you want to support the show, there's a couple quick things you could do that would really help us out. 1, subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. If you go on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a 5-star rating and a couple sentence positive review on why the show inspired you. It might not seem like a lot, but these ratings and reviews are super important, and they signal to Apple that they should put our show in front of other people that might like it. 2, follow us on Instagram at Founder Podcast. Each week we put out teasers, audio clips, and important quotes from the episode. And lastly, check out our website as a mission control for the show. Go to thefounderpod.com. We have a page on there called Special Offers where we link up all the discount codes from our founders' companies, as well as the books and resources that have been recommended. I hope you enjoyed that episode and are looking forward to the next one. Until then, I'm Kallaway, and this is The Founder.